My name is Emmeline Hart. I'm 38 years old, living in Boston, and I used to be the chief strategy officer at one of the country's leading tech investment firms. One early spring morning, just after I helped close an $80 million deal for the company, I was called into a conference room and fired with a single cold sentence. No thank you, no acknowledgement, and not a trace of my name on the documents that sealed that historic success. I stood up, smiled faintly, and walked out in silence. But what they didn't know was, I kept everything. Have you ever been pushed out of something you built with your own hands? Cast aside after pouring every bit of yourself into making someone else's dream work? If this story touches something inside you, leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Because this wasn't my ending. It was only the beginning. I left the building through the service elevator, carrying a cardboard box with everything that once defined my career. A small picture frame of me and my son Noah standing behind a 9-year-old birthday cake, a navy blue mug that said, "Best strategist ever," a gift from an old colleague, and a leather notebook where I'd first outlined ideas for major deals. Everything else, projects, data files, reports, internal systems, had been locked down in less than 10 minutes after I signed my termination notice. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because the tears had dried up long ago. I used to be a single mother, trying to rebuild from nothing after a bitter divorce at age 30. Back then, Noah was just 4, lactose intolerant, coughing through the night and terrified of sleeping alone. I did whatever I could. Worked in a county policy office during the day, tutored college students online in the evenings, and stayed up late researching market trends and data models, hoping to create some kind of launchpad out of the mess. Every step forward in my career came at the cost of time stolen from my son. And I truly believed that if I worked hard enough, the system would recognize it. I was wrong. Not because I hadn't done enough, but because I put my faith in a place that never welcomed women like me. Quiet, methodical, not great at cocktail parties after hours. As I stepped through the main lobby, a few employees sat glued to their screens, avoiding my eyes like I was some piece of outdated software just uninstalled. No one offered a hug or even a question. Except for one glance. Jenna, the new intern I had just on board last week. Her lips were tight, eyes glassy, but she said nothing. And I understood. I'd been there too, seeing injustice but too young to speak. Outside, Boston's sky drizzled light rain, air sharp enough to numb my fingers. I sat in my car for nearly 40 minutes, not driving anywhere. Just staring into the rearview mirror at my tangled hair and the tired shadows beneath my eyes after weeks of sleepless nights. I brushed my fingers lightly across my face, no longer recognizing the woman who once stepped into boardrooms with confidence, building strategies that tripled company value in 2 years. All I saw was a jobless mother holding a box full of memories. I didn't call anyone. Not my mom, not my best friend. I was afraid that if I said it out loud, it would become too real. Instead, I drove to Noah's school and waited silently by the soccer field gate until the dismissal bell rang. He came running, backpack swinging, hair tousled from pee. The moment he saw me, he lit up and rushed to open the car door, hopping into the back seat. "I thought you had a big meeting today," he said, pulling off his mask, still catching his breath. "You said today was the big deal closing." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel and forcing the most normal smile I could manage. "It's done. I think I need a little break now." Noah sat quietly for a while, then leaned back in his seat without another word. He was never the clingy kind. He had learned to read my moods by the time he was 6. On some days he pulled his own dinner from the fridge because I was too tired to get up from my desk. On other nights he'd tuck a blanket around me when I'd fallen asleep beside an open laptop still running spreadsheets. I turned into the narrow road that led to our rented apartment. Thin walls, cheap floors, and neighbors whose fan noise traveled through the vents. It wasn't much, but it gave me and Noah separate corners to study and work. My mind wasn't on being fired. It was on next week's tuition deadline, this month's phone bill, and whether I could still afford his dental work. After Noah went to his room to do homework, I opened my personal laptop, the one I used to call my backup brain. I'd always backed up everything from scattered ideas to finalized drafts. Not out of paranoia, but because I once lost everything when a company server crashed. That lesson stuck. I opened a folder labeled Phoenix, the campaign we spent 6 months building to land the Draper West investment deal. Inside were pitch decks, risk analyses, annotated reports, each file bearing my name and timestamp. I scrolled down to a video file. It was footage from one of our brainstorming sessions. I stood at the whiteboard explaining growth models while Bryce sat silently behind me. The way he looked at me back then, like he'd already decided that what I created would eventually belong to him. I don't know why I didn't cry. My hands trembled slightly as I hovered over the final blueprint, the one that helped them secure that $80 million contract. That blueprint no longer had my name on it. And in that very moment, I knew I wasn't going to stay quiet any longer. I sat in the small kitchen, yellow light casting long shadows across the worn wood table. The scent of cold coffee drifted from an old mug as if reminding me that time was moving, but I remained frozen in front of the screen. I opened the Phoenix_final folder, the archive of every strategic draft for the most important project of my career. It had everything: financial models, risk scenarios, exit schedules, and notes scribbled at 3 a.m. on my tablet. Each file was time-stamped. Every line of data carried my imprint, born of sleepless nights and relentless edits. Scrolling deeper, I stopped at an audio file titled meeting_1107_private.wave. I didn't remember why I saved it. Maybe that day the internal recorder failed and I used my phone instead. Or maybe something inside me sensed something wasn't right. I put in my earbuds. Bryce's voice came through, smug and clear. I'm going to use Emmeline's plan. But it all needs to be rebranded before we send it. Draper West expects a leadership name. Not someone from the strategy level. They want a face. And I'm already being considered for Leader of the Year, so let's make sure the credit lands where it's useful. Someone chuckled. Probably the VP of Marketing. Does she know? Bryce laughed softly. Emmeline? She's a builder. Not someone who belongs on the stage. She won't say anything. She's used to it. I pulled out my earbuds, heart pounding, skin chilled. I looked around the kitchen, feeling as though I'd stepped into a different universe. One where my worth wasn't measured by the quality of my work, but by how quietly I could be erased. A place where I was just scaffolding for someone else's spotlight. I opened 3 more files, strategy decks for previous projects that had been celebrated in the media. Each started with my concepts, my research, my initial drafts. But in the final versions, Emmeline Hart was gone. Replaced by, approved by Bryce Callahan, Chief Executive Officer. I leaned back in my chair, stripped bare of the identity I had lived inside for years. No line of credit. No thanks. Not even a whisper of acknowledgement. I knew these files alone could begin a legal case. But I also knew Bryce had a team of powerful attorneys and a board that wouldn't be moved without more weight. I needed more. I needed someone who had seen it all from the inside. And one name flashed across my mind like a beam through darkness. Margot Jensen. Margot had been Bryce's senior assistant for over 3 years. She was meticulous, sharp, and so quiet it made her hard to read. I was never close to her, but I remember clearly the moment she packed up her things and left the office. Dismissed for not aligning with company culture. Everyone whispered she'd clashed with upper management, but no one really knew what had happened. I went through my personal contacts and found her number, still saved simply as MJ. I typed a short message. Hi Margot, this is Emmeline. I don't know if now's the right time, but I need to talk to you about Paragon. It's serious. If you're open to it, I'd like to buy you a coffee. 30 minutes passed. No reply. I set my phone down, turned back to my laptop and reopened the audio file, this time skipping to the end. Bryce's voice softened, someone closed a folder, a chair creaked, and then his final words came through. Winning isn't about who did the work. It's about who gets remembered. I bit my lip, a cold sweat gathering down my back. I thought of every time I'd received performance reviews citing a lack of leadership presence, every review cycle where I was rated lower than my actual results, every team dinner or investor briefing where I'd been overlooked. And then my phone lit up. Emmeline, I got your message. I know why you reached out. I have a few things you should see. Meet me at Cornerstone Cafe, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't bring anything from work. I typed back, I'll be there. My hand rested on the table, feeling my heartbeat pulsing beneath the skin. Not out of fear, but because for the first time, it felt like I was about to step into a part of the story I was finally allowed to write myself. The next morning, I arrived at Cornerstone right on time. Boston's air was sharp with cold, and the cafe windows were fogged with soft rings of condensation. Margot sat in a secluded corner, her light gray trench coat draped over the next chair, a cappuccino cooling in her hand. She looked just as sharp as the last time I saw her, hair pulled back neatly, eyes scanning the room like she was silently assessing every movement. I sat across from her, my hands still cold as I touched the fresh cup of coffee placed before me. Margot didn't bother with small talk. "Did you bring a company device?" I shook my head. "Just personal equipment." She nodded, then reached into her bag and placed a black, unlabeled USB drive on the table. "This has everything I backed up while I worked there. Recordings from 22 meetings for internal drafts with metadata edits, and 2 email chains where Bryce instructed me to reformat documents so the listed contributor changed, from you to him." I stared at the small object on the table like it was a flickering match in the dead of winter. "Why did you keep it?" I asked, voice low. Margot locked eyes with me, her tone quiet but tense. "At first for protection. But after I was forced out for lack of commitment, I realized I wasn't the only one being erased. I honestly didn't think you'd ever stand up. But when I saw your name scrubbed from the internal newsletter, the one I used to edit myself, I knew Bryce had gone too far." I clenched my hands on my lap. "Are you sure this is strong enough?" She gave a faint smirk. "If this isn't, then nothing is." I picked up the USB and slipped it into my bag, feeling like I was carrying a piece of shared memory we were both told to forget. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep in his room, I closed the door gently and powered on my personal laptop. I plugged in the USB. The folder loaded, each file named with precise timestamps and clear titles. board_strategy_2022_Q1.wave. Internal remote docs. Metadata and PDX. I began listening. In the first recording, Bryce's voice came through crisp and unbothered. "This strategy could be credited to anyone as long as they know how to present. Emmeline did well, but she doesn't have executive presence. Doesn't appeal to investors, lacks media polish. Putting my name on it is the smarter move." A soft female voice followed, probably the communications director. "Does she know about that?" Bryce hesitated, then chuckled. "She never pushes back. People like her just work, they don't ask. We need someone who can step on stage, not someone who hides in the background." I didn't remove my earbuds. I kept clicking through the files. One PowerPoint document had the lead strategist field. Originally it said, Emmeline Hart. But then it was changed to Bryce's name with an edit date, the same day I was presenting remotely to clients during a business trip. Each edit, each audio clip, sliced through memory like a cold blade. But this time I didn't feel powerless. I felt like I was holding pieces of the truth someone tried desperately to bury. Just before midnight, as I was backing everything up to a secure drive, my phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. "Emmeline, this is Caleb. I used to manage IT at Paragon. I think you should have this." Attached was a zip file and a separate message. "This is a snippet from an internal chat between Bryce and the head of HR. He asked her to lower your quarterly performance score to meet expectations so they'd have grounds for legal termination. I saved it because it felt wrong. But I didn't have the guts to act. Until I heard they fired you." I opened the chat. Bryce had typed clearly. "To remove Emmeline cleanly, I need you to revise the latest review. Keep it subtle. Market average and cite lack of team leadership initiative. I'll handle the optics afterward." The HR director replied, "Understood. I'll send you a draft by tomorrow." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply. Outside, Boston was quiet in the dark, streetlights casting warm glows across patches of melting snow. I looked around the small apartment, the one that once felt cramped and suffocating. Tonight it felt like mission control, a place where I no longer needed to hide. I opened the last file from Margot's USB, a recording from a meeting that wasn't on any official calendar. "She's not the type to fight back," Bryce said with confidence. "She's too principled, too polite. People like that, you push them once and they walk away on their own." I closed my eyes. And then I laughed, not out of joy, but because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I don't normally write emails like this. But that night, after reviewing the last file and saving everything to an external drive, I opened my laptop, scrolled down to contact number 37 in my address book. Dr. Evelyn Brooks. That name echoed through me like a forgotten breath. We had worked together 7 years ago when she was still a strategic investor for a chain of sustainable tech startups. I had been the lead advisor on a pre-seed funding project. Evelyn was nearly 60 at the time, but her eyes were as bright as someone 25, and every word she spoke carried a weight that made others fall silent. Back then, over lunch after we closed a deal together, she once told me, "If one day you want to lead something real, don't wait for someone to hand you permission. Just call me." I never forgot that sentence, but over the years I never truly believed I was real enough to make that call. Till now. I typed a simple subject line, "Evelyn, I think that day has come." In the body I briefly described what had happened. No complaints. No self-pity. Just a message saying I was ready to lead something of my own, no longer standing in someone else's spotlight. 3 days passed without a response. I wasn't disappointed. He was a busy woman. And if my story no longer held any value, I wasn't going to force it. But on the 4th day I received a reply. Just one line. Thursday, 10 a.m., 17th floor, Aspen Fund Conference Room. I arrived on time. The office building stood on Boylston Street, glass gleaming with the early morning light like sturdy beams of steel. The 17th floor was unusually quiet. At the end of the hall, the conference room contained only a whiteboard, a pot of mint tea, and Evelyn already seated, reviewing documents on her iPad. She looked up. Her eyes hadn't changed. Deep, sharp, and still capable of making me feel like she could read me down to the core. "Have a seat," she said, pointing to the chair across from her. "I've read everything. The message, the recordings, the metadata, the altered reviews. All of it." I nodded slightly. "I'm not expecting anything, just your thoughts." Evelyn closed the iPad and set it aside. "Emmeline, you've done great work in silence. But now I don't need someone who builds in the dark. I need someone who steps forward, charts the path, and puts their name on it." I swallowed hard. "You mean?" "My new fund is restructuring. I want to build an independent, transparent investment consulting model focused on long-term strategy, not short-term wins. I need someone who understands the system but isn't beholden to it." She leaned back in her chair. "And I believe that person is you." I said nothing. My heart was pounding like something beyond imagination was suddenly real. Evelyn didn't blink. "I'm not asking you to be an advisor. I'm asking you to be a co-founder." I looked up, barely able to feel my lips. "You want me to co-found this?" "And be the CEO," she said without hesitation. "The company name?" "I left that blank in the incorporation paperwork, waiting for you to decide." I gave a small, uncertain laugh. "You trust me that much? After everything I've been through?" Evelyn poured tea into a thin porcelain cup. "I trust what you just did. You didn't react with outrage. You acted like someone who knows the truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. You saved everything. You didn't let anger destroy the evidence. You lived through injustice but didn't let it destroy you." I looked at her, feeling the air thicken around us. "You could walk away. You could sue them, expose everything, and spend the rest of your life in a new condo with a settlement check. But if there's still something inside you that wants to build, then this is the moment." I placed both hands on the table, my palms burning warm. "If I say yes, where do we begin?" Evelyn smiled. "With your name. Heartwest Strategies. I want your name on every door. Every time we meet with investors, you won't be behind the projector anymore. You'll be the one presenting. The one deciding." I leaned back, staring at the pure white ceiling of the conference room, a wave surging through me. After years of working under someone else's name, in just one moment I was given a chance to reclaim mine, and put it somewhere no one could erase. I looked at Evelyn, my voice hoarse. "I need one day to think." "Of course," she said. "But don't take too long. You've already given too many years to places that didn't deserve you. Don't hesitate when the right door finally opens." I left the conference room holding a thin folder. Inside were outlines for the organizational structure, CEO responsibilities, budget categories, and one blank sheet titled, "Official Brand Name." On the way home, I stopped in front of a small bookstore. I stood for a long while staring at a card that read, "Sometimes the door doesn't open. Sometimes you have to build the wall and carve your own way through it." I bought the card. That night, sitting at my laptop, I typed one word onto the line Evelyn had left empty. Heartwest. Below that, I signed my name. No title. No approval needed. Just my name. I didn't expect to walk into the new office feeling so calm. There were no launch banners, no inspiring speeches, no clapping crowds. Just a foggy morning, a steaming cup of coffee on my desk, and a temporary nameplate taped to the glass door. Heartwest Strategies. We rented a small floor in an old Cambridge building. Not fancy, not loud, but filled with natural light and clean air. Evelyn said, "Every big idea starts in rooms like this." I agreed. What mattered wasn't the place you sat in, but what you turned that seat into. In that first week, Evelyn and I restructured the entire operating model. We didn't follow traditional consulting methods. No pitching to win points. No flashy hollow strategies. We chose partners who dared to face the truth, invest in long-term value, and listen to voices that had long been ignored. That same week, an email landed in the company inbox. The sender: Mark Talbot, Director of Investments at Waymark Holdings, a private fund that Paragon Axis, my former company, had pursued for nearly 4 months without closing a deal. Mark's message was short. "We hear you're leading Heartwest. The strategy draft you created is still on our table. If you're ready to continue, we'd like to work directly with you. No intermediaries." I read it 3 times. Not because I doubted it, but because it felt both sweet and piercing. That project had been my heartbeat. I built it through countless sleepless nights. Yet when it was finally presented, my name had been erased from every slide. And now, not only had they called me by name, they wanted to work with me directly. I forwarded the email to Evelyn. Her reply: "Do it well. But don't try to prove anything. Just do it right." We sent an updated proposal adjusted for the latest market data, and included a leadership development program that I had originally been told to cut, to shorten the pitch. After 3 Zoom calls and 2 in-person sessions, Waymark officially signed with Heartwest. The investment amount remained the same, but the entire coordination team shifted to us. That news spread through the investment world faster than I expected. And not long after, I received an email from an old address. Someone I used to call my boss. Bryce Callahan. Subject line: "Perhaps we should talk." I sat in front of the screen, rereading the message that held only one sentence. "I think we both know this is no longer personal. Let's meet and resolve this like adults." I leaned back in my chair and typed a single line in response. "You're speaking with the CEO of Heartwest. My calendar is full through the end of the quarter." There was no malice. No sarcasm. I simply stated my title, the truth about my schedule, and left no room for negotiation. 3 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. The voicemail said, "Emmeline, this is Bryce. I think we should pause for a moment and think rationally. No one wants a prolonged war. Call me back when you can." I didn't call back. That evening, just after I sent Waymark the implementation plan for Phase 1, Noah walked into my office holding a mug of warm milk. He set it gently on my desk, rested his chin in his palm, and smiled at me. "Mom, you seem different today," Noah said. "Not like you used to be at Paragon." I froze. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're not looking at the computer like you're being punished anymore. You're looking at it like you're winning." I laughed, pulling his chair closer. "Maybe. I'm working for someone I actually trust." Noah tilted his head. "Who's that?" I tapped his chin gently. "Me." Out there, Bryce was probably furious. Probably scrambling to contain the damage. But in this small room, I was rewriting every chapter of the story I was once erased from. I was in a meeting with Evelyn and the internal communications team when I got a message from my attorney, Dana. Her text was short and cold like an old-school fax. "Paragon Axis has filed suit. Allegations: intellectual property theft and unfair competition." I reread it and gave a quiet laugh. Evelyn looked up, unsurprised. "We knew this was coming," she said calmly. "They don't know how to lose quietly." I wasn't worried, at least not legally. Everything I had, recordings, metadata, witness statements, were personal property, created through my own labor and intellect before I was forced out of the company without so much as a thank you. But I knew this wasn't just about paperwork. They wanted to attack my image. My credibility. The pieces of identity I spent years building. That same day, Dana filed a countersuit. 3 main claims: unlawful termination, misappropriation of professional credit, and defamation intended to damage personal reputation. She sent me the draft before submitting, every sentence crafted with the precision of ice. I spent nearly an hour reading through it alone in a quiet conference room. At the end was a section titled Claim for Damages and Lost Income Over 5 Years, with a number so large I had to blink. Not out of greed, but because for the first time someone had dared to assign a real value to my work. 2 days later, the media started using my name. Front page of a finance journal, strategist erased, now leading a new era in investment consulting. Journalists called Heart West nonstop. Some wanted interviews about the company's model, others asked about the lawsuit. I declined most, not out of avoidance, but because I wasn't ready to let my story be retold in someone else's words. On Wednesday morning, as I was brewing coffee in our tiny kitchen, Dana called. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency. There's been a leak. An internal memo from Paragon Access just got out. It's been sent to 3 newspapers and 1 TV station. Your name is in it, clearly, fully, unedited. Someone sent it. I didn't ask who. I just sat down and thought of the look Margot gave me at the cafe, that quiet resolve like she was rebuilding something inside her that had once collapsed. An hour later, a reporter from the Atlantic Ledger called. She introduced herself as Haley Nguyen, specializing in corporate ethics litigation. Her voice was steady and respectful. Hart, I won't ask you to comment on the lawsuit. But I do need to confirm, is this memo authentic? It is, I said without hesitation. And it's not the only one. She paused a few seconds, then asked, do you know who leaked it? I don't think that matters, I replied. What matters is that the truth was finally spoken. Even if it wasn't through my voice. That afternoon, I watched the 5 o'clock financial report on Boston Business Channel. The segment included slides from a meeting last year, where Bryce discussed plans to remove my name from the Phoenix Project. A banner ran across the bottom of the screen. Paragon Access faces backlash after internal recordings allege employee credit theft. I didn't feel triumphant. I just sat there, a mug of lukewarm tea in hand, and asked myself, why does it always take collapse before people admit that silence doesn't mean consent? Within a week, national media picked up the story. A headline in the Washington Standard read, "Working quietly and being erased without a sound." They called me the face of the silent revolution, which left me both humbled and uneasy. Because I wasn't the face of any movement. I was just a mother who had sacrificed too much, and finally had nothing left to lose but her voice. That evening, Noah was doing homework in the living room. I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. Hey, would you want to switch schools next year? One with advanced science and a better soccer team. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. Are you talking about that expensive one? I nodded. He paused, then said softly, if you think you deserve something better, then so do I. I hugged him, feeling a part of me quietly mend from the inside out. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from a former colleague at Paragon Access, signed Nathan B. A data analyst I used to manage directly. The message was short. You're not the only one they did this to. I have documents proving HR review tampering. I'll testify if needed. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Thank you. You have no idea what you've just done. I set the phone down, no longer feeling like someone standing alone against the world. Because now the world was starting to stand with me. Every morning when I opened my phone, my inbox was filled with new messages from names I had either long forgotten or never even known. They were former employees of Paragon Access, project assistants who were reassigned without explanation, financial advisors who'd been forced out for not fitting company culture, even someone who had worked in a different state office but had heard enough about Bryce Callahan to know what was going on. Some sent just one line, "Thank you. Now I have the courage to speak." Others wrote in detail, attaching old performance reviews, internal emails, or notes they'd kept for years. Some asked to remain anonymous. Others offered to testify if needed. I saved every message, every file, compiling them into a dedicated folder in our system. I named it Unredacted Voices. Evelyn noticed me staying up past 2 a.m. several nights in a row, reading, compiling, responding to each one. She said quietly, "This is how real justice begins. Not in courtrooms but at desks like this. But what unsettled me the most didn't come from the gratitude or anger. It came on a rainy afternoon as I was preparing the Phase 2 presentation for Waymark, when my phone buzzed with a messenger notification from a name I didn't recognize. Alexa Callahan. I froze. Callahan. I opened the message. It was short. I'm Bryce Callahan's daughter. I know you may not want to hear from me, but I need to talk. I stared at the screen, unsettled. I had never imagined someone like Bryce had a daughter working in the same industry. In the media, he always appeared alone. No family, no past. I took a deep breath and replied, I'm willing to listen. If you truly want to talk. We arranged to meet at a small cafe near the Charles River. Quiet enough for privacy, but not so much that it felt confrontational. Alexa arrived on time. A young woman, maybe 25, slender frame, wearing a chestnut sweater and eyes that seemed to carry everything left unsaid. As she sat down across from me, a chill ran through my chest, not from the weather, but from the atmosphere between two women who had both lived in the shadow of one powerful man. I know I probably shouldn't be here, Alexa began, holding her tea without sipping. But I need you to understand. I'm not on his side. I used to be because I'm his daughter. But not anymore. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. When I was a kid, I lived with my mom. He'd show up once a month. Sometimes with expensive gifts, sometimes disappearing with no reason. My mom always said, don't expect anything from him. But I believed anyway. Until I got older, joined the finance world, and saw for myself that she was right. She paused as if checking whether I had a reaction. I stayed silent. One summer during college, I interned at Paragon. Unofficially. He didn't introduce me to anyone. Didn't teach me anything. Just said, don't embarrass me. I touched the side of my coffee cup gently. That girl, I realized, had once been in the same building as me, also hidden behind the same shadow. After that, I left. But I kept watching what he did. And I saw him slowly destroy everything around him. You were the first person to stand up to him. I saw you on the news, read the articles, and realized, what I never dared to do you already had. Her last sentence was barely above a whisper, her voice trembling. I looked her in the eyes and spoke slowly. I didn't stand up to your father. I stood up for myself. But if that helps someone else find their voice, then I have no regrets. Alexa nodded slightly. For the first time, she held my gaze without flinching. I still have a few internal emails from when I was in the system. Not much, but they might help your case. If you want them, I'll send them. I nodded. Thank you for coming. And thank you for not staying silent. She gave a soft, almost shy smile. I think if I didn't do something now, I wouldn't be able to respect myself anymore. When she left, I stayed a little longer. The rain had stopped, but the wind was still cool. I didn't know what to call what I felt. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't triumph. Not even pity. Just a quiet sadness. For a child raised in the shadow of a father who was too powerful, too cold, and too accustomed to control. Alexa was part of that system. But she had stepped out. And if anything brought me peace through all this, it was seeing someone young like her choose not to continue that cycle. I decided to hold a press conference on a Monday morning. It wasn't a beautiful day, but there was something fitting about the gray sky reflected in the glass panels of the building where we rented the hall. No fireworks. No drums. Just an atmosphere thick with the sense that something long held back was finally about to be released. Evelyn sat beside me on the small stage, spine straight, eyes steady like a pillar anchoring the room full of camera lights. Margot was in the front row, simple outfit, hands clasped in her lap, but her gaze never wavered. Caleb and two of my former colleagues, Monica and Jared, stood quietly at the back in the same position they once held behind the scenes. Only today they no longer had to hide. Before I began, I scanned the room. The press turnout was larger than I expected. Major TV networks were present. Even familiar faces from the investment world. People who once nodded to Bryce at cocktail events I was never invited to. I didn't bring a printed speech. Just a slim folder in hand, filled with the evidence I had gathered over the past few months. I stood up, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at the audience. My name is Emmeline Hart. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because silence is no longer safe. The room fell still. I used to be the chief strategy officer at Paragon Axis. I was behind the plans that helped that company grow, expand, attract funding. But my name wasn't in the records. Not on the awards. Not in the recognition emails. Only in early drafts and sleepless nights no one knew about. I paused for a few seconds. When I was fired, I thought I'd just quietly disappear, like so many others who fell out of that system. But then I realized there were so many people like me, dismissed, erased, pushed aside from the very things they helped build. And they don't want to be silent anymore. I held up the folder in my hand. This contains proof. Internal recordings, edited data emails, manipulated performance reviews, secret meetings with no official minutes. Not my words. These were written, signed, and saved by the very people who denied they existed. A journalist raised their hand. I nodded. Hart, can you confirm that the individuals standing behind you today were all once employees of Paragon? Yes. And not just them. Many more have sent in statements, evidence, documents. I'm not standing here alone. The sound of camera shutters clicked nonstop. But I didn't look toward the lenses. I looked toward Evelyn, and saw her give a subtle nod. I continued. I don't believe in collapse. I believe in clarity. If anyone ever asks why I chose to speak up, the answer is, because of people like Margot, like Caleb, like Alexa, Bryce's daughter, people who could no longer watch others be suffocated while staying silent themselves. Another reporter called out, clear and direct. What do you hope will change after today? I paused for a moment. I don't believe a single press conference can change the system. But I hope those who are still silent out of fear will realize they're not alone. That maybe this time their voices won't be ignored. The room remained still, but I could feel something shift. Not the walls. Not the light. But something in the people. When the press conference ended, I stepped into the back corridor where only the soft hum of the HVAC and dim overhead lights remained. Evelyn stood waiting, hands in her coat pockets, her face calm. You did well, she said, not raising her voice. Nothing extra. Nothing missing. Just enough to start a chain reaction. Margot walked up next, eyes a little wet but lips pressed firmly together. She gave me a quiet hug, said nothing. That evening, the news spread across the country. Media outlets called it the first reckoning in strategy consulting in over a decade. Paragon Axis had some of its investment file access suspended. 3 major contracts were pulled within 7 days. Bryce Callahan was officially placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. No statement. No press reply. Just a single cold line posted on the company's website. By the weekend, I appeared on the cover of Forbes Women. The photo showed me in a white blouse, standing in front of the Heart West office window, late afternoon light casting a soft blur over one side of my face. The italicized headline read, From Erased to Architect. I read the article in our small kitchen, while Noah worked on a STEM project at the table across from me. When he looked up and saw me reading, he asked, Are you going to hang that on the wall? I shook my head. I think I'll print it, fold it up, and tuck it inside my notebook. Noah frowned. Why not hang it? You're famous now. I smiled and brushed the hair from his forehead. Because what's worth remembering isn't the cover. It's how you live after you leave the page. His teacher's name was Rachel, mid-40s, slender, with kind eyes that always softened when she spoke to the kids. That day, the class was holding a parent-student session. Not to present achievements, but to talk openly about dreams and the future. I arrived a little late due to traffic, just in time to sit in the back when Rachel asked Noah, What do you want to be when you grow up? Without hesitation, Noah said clearly, I want to build a company like my mom. The room chuckled softly. Not mockingly, just warm and full. Rachel tilted her head toward me and gave a subtle nod, like a quiet congratulations. I didn't say anything. I just watched my son sitting tall, eyes bright, and felt my heart still. I didn't think about speeches, articles, or the names that were once erased. In that moment, all I saw was a child who used to quietly close the door while I took Zoom calls, who used to eat dinner alone when I was buried in a slide deck, now speaking his dream without fear. After the session, Rachel came over to greet me. Noah's exceptional. He articulates his thoughts better than most kids his age. I thanked her, then turned to Noah, gently holding his hand as we stepped out onto the schoolyard. Late autumn leaves scattered gently in the breeze, the path painted in orange and gold like a slow-moving painting. Noah looked up at me, eyes curious. Mom, did what I said embarrass you? I stopped walking. Embarrass me? Because most kids said astronaut or doctor. But I said I wanted to be like you. I knelt down, looked him in the eyes, and said softly, "There's nothing that could make me prouder, Noah. If you want to build something, don't hesitate to begin. And don't wait for someone to give you permission." A week later, I received an invitation from the organizers of the Women Build America Summit. I had never attended before, much less imagined being a speaker. The note was brief. "We believe your story not only inspires but changes things. Silence has lasted long enough." I sat for a long time at my computer drafting the speech. Wrote. Deleted. Rewrote. Then deleted again. In the end, I closed the laptop, stepped onto the balcony, looked out at the glowing city, and asked myself, if I could say only one thing, what would it be? When I stood on that stage, the spotlight was so bright I couldn't make out faces in the crowd, but I could feel their attention. There was no teleprompter. No printed script. Just one small piece of paper in my hand with a single sentence. "We don't need anyone's permission to begin again. We just need to know we are worth more." I read it slowly. Applause followed, not loud but firm. I lifted my head and looked into the dark blur beyond the lights, my heart quiet like the surface of water after rain. I didn't mention Bryce. I didn't mention Paragon Axis. I didn't need to. Most people in that room were women who had once borne skeptical glances, been passed over for promotions because they spoke softly, or because they didn't move fast enough to someone else's rhythm. They understood without me having to retell the story. After the speech, I stepped off the stage and walked past the front row when an older woman with silver hair stood up and shook my hand. She said, "I once resigned because I couldn't bear how quietly women were being pushed down. Today I came to hear you, and I'm so glad I did." Another person handed me a small rolled note tied with ribbon. I opened it later. It read only one sentence: "You helped me remember the sound of my own voice." That evening, when I returned to the Heartwest office, I took a slow walk past each desk. Evelyn had left early. All the lights were off except for the glow spilling from my office into the hallway. I sat down at my desk, opened my computer, and looked through the list of unread emails. Most were congratulations. Some were partnership inquiries. But one name made me pause. Sender: Lena Jensen. Subject line: "You don't know me, but I was the one who removed your slide." I opened it. I was a temporary contract worker in the Paragon Communications department last year. "I didn't know you, only that Bryce asked me to delete a slide with your name on it from the Phoenix deck. I didn't understand why. I was just trying to keep my job. But when I saw you on stage today, I cried. I'm sorry. And I thank you for not disappearing quietly like so many others." I didn't reply right away. I just saved the message into a folder I titled, "No One is Invisible." I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I turned off the screen, stood up, put on my coat, and stepped into the quiet hallway. Outside, the city buzzed on with its own rhythm. But I was different now. No longer the quiet one in the back of the conference room. No longer the name cut from the credits. No longer the woman asking permission to lead. I entered the elevator, pressed the lobby button, hands in my coat pockets, back straight. Not to prove anything. Just because I finally knew I belonged. Right here in this space where my voice didn't need to ask for room. It was here. Clear. And no one had the right to erase it anymore. If you're listening to this story and you've been through something similar, I want you to know, you are not alone. Maybe you haven't stood on a stage. Maybe you haven't filed a claim. Maybe you haven't yet said aloud what's been weighing on you for years. But if you've ever been pushed aside, ever been told you're not enough, ever lost your voice in a place you helped build, then you understand me. And I understand you. I didn't tell this story to be admired. I told it to remind you that a new beginning never needs anyone's permission. Sometimes all it takes is one big enough reason to stop looking back. If there's something you want to share, leave a message below. I want to hear your story, because every voice raised is one more person who's no longer invisible. And if something in this story resonated with you, follow the channel to hear more stories ahead. About motherhood, womanhood, and what it means to stay human in a world that isn't always fair, but always leaves space for us to write something truer.